I was 16 years old when my parents threw me out for being pregnant. I did not know where I would go or how I would survive. I had no one, only the tiny life growing inside me and a heart full of fear. Every day felt impossible, and every night I wondered if I would ever be safe again. Then, 22 years later, I received a court summons that made my hands shake and my heart stop. You are watching this story on YouTube, so drop a comment and tell me which state you are from as I share everything that happened next. My name is Emily, and I want to share with you the story of how my life changed forever when I was 16. I had been keeping my pregnancy a secret for a few months, hoping that my parents would understand, but the day I told them, everything fell apart. They screamed, they called me names, and they told me I was no longer welcome in their home. I had never felt so small, so worthless, and so alone. I packed a small bag with what I could carry, and I left the house, not knowing where I would sleep that night. I walked through the streets, clutching my bag, praying that someone would help me. The cold air bit my cheeks, and every car that passed felt like a reminder that I did not belong anywhere. I had no money, no friends I could turn to, and no plan. All I had was the tiny life inside me and the hope that somehow I could survive. I found a shelter that night, a place filled with other young mothers and girls who had been abandoned, kicked out, or forgotten. I will never forget the way they welcomed me, even though I was terrified and exhausted. I was 14 weeks pregnant, and I did not know anything about taking care of a baby or myself. I learned quickly because there was no choice. Every day, I worked odd jobs, cleaned, and did whatever I could to earn enough money to eat and stay safe. Some nights, I cried myself to sleep, feeling the weight of my parents' betrayal. I wanted to scream, to tell them that I did not deserve this, but there was no one to hear me. As the months passed, I grew stronger. I learned how to manage my fear and my anger, turning it into determination. I would not let my parents' cruelty define me or destroy the life I was carrying. I named my daughter Lily before she was born, imagining the future I would give her, a future full of love, safety, and hope. Even though I was only 16, I promised myself that I would build a life for us, no matter how impossible it seemed. I never spoke to my parents again after that day. I did not know if they cared, if they even thought about me, or if they were happy I was gone. The years passed slowly. Every day was a struggle, every challenge a test, but Lily grew strong, smart, and full of life. I worked multiple jobs, went to night school, and learned how to manage everything on my own. I made friends who became like family, people who supported me when the world felt cold. I began to rebuild myself, brick by brick, creating a life that I could be proud of. Even though I thought I had left the past behind, I had no idea that 22 years later, my parents would try to pull me back into a world I had long escaped, and that their decision would set off a chain of events I could never have imagined. Life continued, and I believed I had left the pain of my past behind. Lily was growing, and I was building a stable life for us. I had a small apartment, a steady job, and a few close friends who had become my chosen family. I felt proud of how far we had come, but I never expected that one phone call would shatter the calm I had built over 22 years. I was working late one evening when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was formal, cold, and unmistakable. It was a court clerk. I listened, unable to breathe, as she told me that my parents had filed a lawsuit against me. I repeated her words, certain that I had misunderstood. They were suing me. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. I could not believe it. I sat down, gripping the phone as if it could keep me steady. Questions raced through my mind. Why now? After all these years, why would they drag me back into their world? I remembered the pain, the nights I spent crying, the fear and uncertainty I had carried as a teenager. All of it came rushing back. I could hear Lily in the background, asking why I looked so scared, and I forced myself to take a deep breath. I told her everything would be fine, even though I had no idea how this was going to end. The next days were a blur. I called a lawyer I had trusted for years, someone who had helped me with other legal matters. She listened carefully, then explained the situation. My parents were attempting to claim a portion of the assets I had inherited from my grandmother, assets that had rightfully been mine. They were using lies, fabricated claims, and the fact that I had been estranged as their argument. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and disbelief. How could they think they had the right to try and take what I had built with so much struggle? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was not just about money. It was about control, about punishing me for choosing to live my life on my own terms. I spent that night preparing documents, gathering proof, and writing down every detail I could remember about their behavior, my own history, and the truth of what had happened. I was determined not to be intimidated or manipulated. I realized that I had survived far worse when I was 16, and I would survive this as well. The fight ahead would not be easy, but I had Lily, my strength, and the knowledge that the truth was on my side. I also knew that there were secrets my parents had kept, things they thought were buried, and I had to be ready for anything. Every phone call, every document, and every meeting brought tension, but also clarity. I began to see patterns, small mistakes they had made, and ways I could defend myself. The sense of fear slowly turned into a sense of strategy. I realized that this battle was not just about protecting myself, but about finally confronting the people who had caused so much pain. I had a chance to take back control, to show them that I was no longer the scared 16-year-old they had kicked out. The past was about to collide with the present, and I had no choice but to face it head-on. The day of the first court hearing arrived, and I felt a knot in my stomach that I could not untie. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me feel strong, composed, and ready for whatever my parents would try to throw at me. I held Lily's hand tightly as we entered the courthouse, her small fingers giving me a sense of calm and purpose. I had imagined this moment for weeks, rehearsing how I would respond, how I would stay composed, and how I would protect myself. I knew that my parents would be there, sitting across the room, wearing expressions of superiority, confident that they could intimidate me. The judge called the case, and my parents' lawyer began to speak first. Their words were precise, calculated, and cruel. They described me as irresponsible, estranged, and undeserving of any inheritance, painting a picture that I did not recognize. Every accusation, every lie, hit me like a physical blow. I felt my pulse racing, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had spent years building a life of integrity, and now I had to defend it in front of strangers. I listened carefully, noting every claim and every false statement, preparing my mind to respond. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall and faced the court. I recounted the truth of what had happened 22 years ago, explaining how I had been thrown out at 16, pregnant and alone. I shared the struggle of raising Lily, the work I had done, and the life I had built despite the obstacles. I explained how my parents' actions had shaped me, but they had never broken me. I felt a quiet strength growing inside me as I spoke, a reminder of every challenge I had overcome. The words came naturally, as if they had been waiting inside me all these years. Then my lawyer presented evidence that my parents had not expected me to have. There were documents, letters, and emails that contradicted their claims. The most powerful piece was a recording, something they had thought was destroyed long ago. In it, my parents' own voices admitted what they had done, their intentions to control and manipulate, and their disbelief that I had survived and thrived. The room went silent as the recording played. I could feel the weight of the past lifting, replaced with a sense of vindication. For the first time in 22 years, I realized that I was no longer powerless. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. My parents' faces turned pale, and I could see the realization in their eyes that their plan was failing. I felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. I had spent so many years fearing them, imagining scenarios in which they would try to hurt me again, and now I was watching them face the consequences of their choices. I knew the battle was not entirely over, But this moment marked a turning point. The past had been confronted, the truth had been exposed, and I had stood strong. I was no longer a scared teenager. I was 30 years old, a mother, and a woman who had taken control of her life, and I would not let anyone take that away from me. The final court session arrived, and the tension in the room was almost unbearable. I sat with Lily beside me, holding her hand, feeling her quiet presence give me strength. My parents were there as well, sitting stiffly, their expressions a mixture of anger and disbelief. They had not expected me to fight back, to gather proof, and to uncover the recording that proved their lies. I felt a sense of calm determination. This was the moment I had been preparing for all these years. I was no longer 16, afraid and alone. I was 30, confident, and ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The judge called the case to order. My parents' lawyer began with their final arguments, repeating accusations and attempting to cast doubt. I listened patiently, noting the ways their statements contradicted the evidence. I knew that the truth was clear, and the more they tried to twist the facts, the weaker their case became. When it was my turn, I spoke with clarity and conviction. I told the story of my past, the years of struggle and the life I had built. I explained how my parents had abandoned me, how I had raised Lily alone, and how I had never asked for anything from them. I let the recording play in court, allowing every word of their own voices to confirm what I had said. As the room went silent, I saw the shock in their eyes. They had not expected the truth to emerge so publicly. I felt a mix of relief and satisfaction, knowing that the injustice of my past could no longer be hidden. The judge reviewed all the evidence carefully, taking time to ensure that every detail was considered. I held my breath, waiting for the final decision, but also knowing that I had already won in a deeper way. I had faced the people who had caused me pain and stood my ground. I had refused to be intimidated, and I had proven that I was stronger than they had ever imagined. Finally, the judge spoke. My parents' claims were dismissed, and the court affirmed my full rights to the inheritance and the life I had built. I felt a wave of emotion, tears welling up in my eyes. I looked at Lily and smiled, realizing that we had both survived, grown, and thrived despite everything. My parents sat in silence, unable to respond. I had not only defended myself, but had also reclaimed my sense of self-worth, dignity, and independence. The years of fear, pain, and uncertainty had led to this moment of triumph. As we left the courthouse, I felt a freedom I had never known. My past could no longer control me. My parents' attempt to take from me had failed, and I had emerged stronger than ever. I knew that the scars of the past would always be a part of me, but they no longer held power. I had built a life full of love, resilience, and integrity. 22 years after being thrown out at 16, I had finally proven that survival, strength, and truth could overcome even the deepest betrayal. I had taken back my life, my dignity, and my future, and nothing would ever take them away.